Hello guys, today in this video I would like to show you how to export QGIS layers to AutoCAD LT with retaining some attribute table features. We have already some layers prepared here, which obviously are point layers and line layers. Each of them has been styled accordingly to the purposes, and each of them has specified data in the attribute table, like you can see here. Both line and point layer includes values of data, which can be useful for further work. However, they lose all their attribute data when exported to the AutoCAD. Obviously, we can transfer at least styling by selecting symbol layer symbology here, but in most of cases it won't be enough, especially in AutoCAD Lite, which doesn't give an option for transferring attribute data from QGIS directly. Our DXF file in AutoCAD looks as follows. The style have been transferred completely from QGIS and retrieved accurately, but there is no chance for reading the attribute data at all. So today I'm going to show you a nice workaround how to pass some attribute table data to AutoCAD Lite. First of all, let's back to our QGIS project and consider how could we understand the symbol layer symbology, which allows us to export the whole style of our QGIS layer straight to AutoCAD Lite. Namely, if we, for example, open up the properties, then we can see that all the styles have been gathered here. But there is no styling just within the layer coloration or its shape. Styling covers also the labeling, which in this case looks blank because we haven't provided any labels yet. If you still don't understand what I'm talking about, let's open up this button here and choose, for example, save style. Then you will discover that your style file is not necessarily just the symbology, but as I said, it covers also labeling, map types, diagrams, and so on. But in our case, we don't need most of them. We will need simply the labels for our today's exercise. So let me close it down, this box, and back to our attribute table, where we can specify what certainly data could we need for our AutoCAD project. As shown before, attribute data includes a dozen or so columns, from which most of them are empty, therefore we won't need them. We will focus just within this particular set of data, which is here. So imagine that our label should look like presented in the image right now, where we have basically two conditions for linear layer and at least one condition set for the point layer. So we are expecting something similar in our AutoCAD Lite project. Okay, so let's back to our QGIS and basically let's get started with linear layer, in which we should browse the attribute table and take a look at the relevant columns, which could be helpful with building up the final label as presented in the image previously. And as part of this image, we also need to take a look at the column which basically sets the primary condition for us. This column is number of ways in this case. If it falls as null, then the condition will be different than in the case when some number is provided here. So I think we can start with this basic knowledge and start building up the label for this specified linear layer. So in the properties section, we need to use labels, but in our case, it won't be single label. It will be rule-based labeling. The first rule which we will define here will be the situation when the aforementioned number of ways is null. So as presented in the image previously, primary description can be ND and filter in our case will be the column provided. We can both type it here or use the formula button, which is here. If you have your column name within one full string without any spaces, it should come out nicely as the manner presented below. As you may have noticed, instead of space, I put dash, therefore everything is combined into one string. It's great. I can just double click in this event and the name of my column is selected. Now we are interested in the situation when our data is null. So it's enough to type just at the name of our column, simply throws nothing, so it's null, and hit OK. Next issue to go further is our value. because value needs to include some concatenated stuff, we need to take a look more deeply into some columns, which are presented here and pointed out as necessary for our current task. As the first one will come plant item. Next, we will define the measure length expressed in meters. And as the last one will be the section number. So let's get back to our QGIS right now and execute this rule. So it looks basically like presented here. We are currently defined the filter. Now in the case of our value, we need to build up the column. So the first will be plant item as discussed previously, and we need to use concatenation. Concatenation in QGIS is expressed by two vertical dashes, and between the concatenation we will put simply empty quotes representing the space. As you may have noticed, we have still one empty character, which will help us to move the another part of the string further forward. All right, and obviously another concatenation, which is here, but before we provide another value, it will throw an error. We can check where the problem is. We have unexpected end. Therefore, there's nothing left like just carry on. And another our value will be measured length, and we are starting getting some records underneath in our output preview. And then another concatenation and another blank quotes as previously, and the last one will be section number. But as I've shown you previously, we shall request the measured length with defined measure unit. Therefore, it can't be left as the pure value here because we need to provide some other description. First of all, in the case if our number would start playing the ball and appear in some decimals beyond, we can try to round it by using this function. Function is called round, and placing 0 after the comma when our column name is completed means that the number will be rounded down to 0 decimals. So it always will come as the full number. And now we can optionally place here meters and make another space. But as far as I am concerned, in this event, we don't need to do anything regarding this. So we will leave as it is. Output preview shows that everything should be alright. Then we can close it down. Make sure that we are fine with our font size. I think we can decrease it slightly and optionally change the color of the font. Make it more gray, but this is also the thing which can be tweaked in our AutoCAD. Therefore, we don't need to worry about these particular settings that much, unless we will deal with placement, about which I will tell you later. Now hit OK, and we have the one rule already prepared. Another rule will be opposite to the first one. So again, number of ways, in this case, won't be null. It will represent some value, 1, 3, 2, 5, whatever. So in this event, we need to use the formula is not null and click OK. Now is the time to go back to our attribute table data columns and check the proper order relevant for production, the label as presented in our image earlier. So this time as the first one will come the measured length expressed by meters, particularly for this label. Next we will use number of ways, section number will be the third, and rack status will be fourth. So this is our order, which following is necessary for our current purpose. So let's get back to QGIS and build up the another condition. Measured length, as discussed earlier, can be already rounded to 0 if you want to have just an integer instead of floating decimal number. But because we need a measurement unit here, concatenation is required, but not particularly for just the space, but also for the unit. So we will provide meter, and we can close down the quotes. Space is not necessarily required from this side. I've also recalled that another concatenated value, number of ways, need to fall inside of the brackets. Therefore, to expand our concatenation, here we will open the bracket because the bracket is outside of the called data from attribute table. It's freestanding string here, and from the other end, when another string such as this will be opened up, the enclosing bracket must be provided. So in this case, our stuff should be ready, but I see that some error already occurs because our concatenation haven't been closed down, and we can see that functions is not known. Right, because I made error here. Round must be not rounded, round. Now output preview comes nicely, but we cannot stop. We have still something to add here. Another concatenation should be provided. and this time just the name of our column. Another concatenation, and in quotes we will put dash line, which will act as indicator of another value. The last one, track status. And this is all what we should do with respect of this particular label. As you can see in the output, everything looks nice, but I'm wondering, is this bracket here needed or not? Probably instead of bracket, space should be provided, but another bracket should definitely be included, potentially with the space at the end. Alright, so now we are definitely fine with our label, therefore we should confirm it. And again, don't worry that much about styling, as it will be possible to tweak in AutoCAD LT drawing. When hitting OK, we have forgotten to add the description, but it's not necessary. You can define it as the normal one. Hit apply, hit OK, and the labels already have started appear in our QGIS project so far, and they are an inherent part of our layer styling. So I hope that it started to make sense for you. Let's repeat the process for our point layer. But before we start dealing with our point layer, let's export our current work to AutoCAD and see what changes have been applied as a result of our exercise. So let's close down every layers not needed here. Keep the symbology mode as the symbol layer symbology, because we are exporting the stuff at exactly the same manner as at the very beginning. Symbology scale, again, it must be something about 1 to 1,000 to 1 to 2,000 in order to replicate accurately the size of shapes of our point, the same as line thickness provided in the styling. If you would have just the font only, that wouldn't be the problem to set any symbology scale, because the font eventually can be increased or decreased in AutoCAD. But with terms of styling the particular layers, shapes, polygons, is not that simple. Therefore, the symbology scale must be adjusted accordingly to our AutoCAD drawing circumstances. Make sure that the export labels as mtext elements are switched off. If you switch them on, AutoCAD LT won't allow you to edit font by using select similar option. Since you know this option, clicking by properties and select similar option in AutoCAD, same as AutoCAD LT, you are able to change font appearance in a batch process. If you will use this option as the mtext, this option is not available. Therefore, our font must be like text element instead of mtext. This is like a digression, but very important. Looks like we are confident that our settings are fine. Let's click OK and open up our project in AutoCAD. In AutoCAD, we'll see the difference. Obviously, this is just one layer, the linear layer, but the difference is noticeable. Instead of having just line, we've managed to pass some attribute data here. Of course, it does look naughty already. It's a mess, but I will show you later how to combat with this problem quickly. Let's back to our QGIS and deal with the second point layer. Our point layer will be prepared on an analog basis, but the label circumstances will be slightly different. The steps of preparation, the label, are pretty much the same as previously. We need to go to the properties, and in the properties where the labels haven't been defined so far, we will choose rule-based labeling again. And this is the place where we can define the label properties. But before we do it, let's jump to our attribute table columns and see what conditions must be met this time. So our primary condition will be category name, in which we will sanitize the data by selecting just jointing chamber. And once jointing chamber is selected, the only thing which must come out is plant item and object ID, which this time will come separately. So we won't concatenate anything. We will simply provide the text side by side with offset accordingly to the mother point. So slightly different situation, which will show you how to provide text separately without any concatenation. All right, let's back to QGIS and start defining the rule. First description can be, for example, main. In our filter, we will use category name as discussed previously, and this time category name is equal to jointing chamber. As discussed earlier, because I've used string with the space, I must quote this string, otherwise you will see what will happen. The error appears. Make sure that you are doing correctly. Anyway, output preview will tell you. Okay, since our condition is set, we can go to the value, and in value simply provide the column which is required. Output preview shows that we are correct. There is no space for error anyway. The one of error which might appear here is just choosing the wrong column. And text this time can be decreased slightly, but obviously we can start fiddling with placement. As default, text will appear around the point, but there is no space for situations such as this, as we are going to provide another text separately. So offset from point is required. Thereby, the offset cannot represent the middle of the point. The offset must be adjusted to the situation. We must think where exactly we need to have our text to appear. Do we want it on the top, on the bottom, or maybe on the left or right hand side? The Cartesian system is reliant from the quadrant provided by us. So if we provide quadrant from the top, the Cartesian system will behave upside down. When our quadrant is bottom, the Cartesian system will be as normal, and so forth and so forth. If you want to know more about it, I'm redirecting you to YouTube channels explaining the styling in QGIS. In my point of view, I think I can choose the bottom quadrant and set value y to -5. In the category name, I could also choose offset from the point and make top left quadrant, which should have bring my value somewhere to the bottom. Y offset can be 0, X offset can be -2. Now, if I hit apply, I see just one label, so it must be something wrong, as just one of them appears. So let's get back to our styling options and see is everything alright in our label criteria. I think I have forgotten about one important option, which is rendering. In the rendering, I should have make this option available, which means show all labels for this layer, including colliding labels. It means that the label will be visible despite short distance between one label and another. The same I should do here and hit apply. Then I see my both labels appear, but their location requires correction. Since the main one looks fine, ID must be changed. Let's put Y as the 3, it should push it down. Yeah, and that's correct. Now it's too far. I think now it will be good. So we are happy with the label as we have already. So I think our label is ready for export to our AutoCAD LT project. Now we have everything in our AutoCAD LT drawing. As you can see, all the labels have came out nicely. In fact, they are messy, but now is the moment of sanitizing them. So each of the labels acts as a single object, which its properties and some basic options. It can be moved, can be rotated, but it's not visible that much, as the label falls roughly at the same location where the particular element was represented in QGIS. It means that each single element has its own coordinates, and assigned label has the same coordinates to it. The label is too big. The one downside of this situation is that since label is too big, some of the labels might be missing. I see that some of them are truly missing, therefore it's time to go back to QGIS again and repeat the process. But it's not the whole process we need to repeat, we just need to decrease the font size, especially for the linear layer where the concatenation has came into effort. This font is too big and might lose the data, so instead of 7, make it 3, like here. Instead of 10, make 3, hit OK. They look very small on QGIS, but it's not important right now. For point layers, if we do not concatenate anything, it should be fine. Project, import, export project to AutoCAD, hit OK and reopen it. Now it does look better, as each of the elements has its own label. Alright, so let's go to the very last step, which is styling the font in AutoCAD. You can obviously move one of the elements, place it somewhere outside, it's not a problem. But what I would like to show you here is rather playing with the font itself. Imagine that this font is still too big for your project. So you are clicking on it, right selecting, and you select similar option. When select similar option is selected, then you can model the font height. This is the AutoCAD numeration, but let's decrease it to 1 and see changes applied. The font became accordingly smaller. The situation is more complicated when we import font from QGIS in one bunch, even if this font is separated by different settings, because once we use select similar option, AutoCAD will select all of them. If you want to have them selected separately, then you must create separate layer in QGIS, namely duplicate the layer and provide these two fonts in two duplicated layers. Then it will be fine. For our purpose, we can do these changes for the whole package. So let's make the height 1.5 and everything will be decreased. Optionally, we can move these labels slightly away by typing move option and specify the base point, like here. And I think it should be alright. Cool. So this is the very basic approach which can be applied, but if you wish to pass everything from your data attribute table, then you can specify more rules for your font and show them later in AutoCAD. This is something what I've developed earlier, and a multitude of columns from attribute table have been passed here, both for linear as well as point layer. And you will see quite a lot of colors. When entered the properties and rule-based labeling, you will see that these rules is accordingly more, same as their expressions. Concatenation has been used several times in order to pass literally everything what needed from our data attribute table. Obviously, when you don't need to do concatenate, when you have less data in your attribute table, this exercise is accordingly easier, since you are passing just the single columns with proper offset. Now, let's look on it in the AutoCAD. In AutoCAD Lite project, we have both styled lines, points, as well as their attributes coming straight from data attribute table prepared in QGIS. Some of them still require sanitization, but it shouldn't be a problem against of utter lack of attribute data and lack of possibility to transfer this attribute data from QGIS to AutoCAD on some approachable manner. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video and learned something new. Thank you for your attention and see you in the next video.